Something changed in your soulmate's heart recently, and it happened in a moment when nobody else was watching. They reached a point where pretending they could live without you became harder than admitting how deeply they still feel connected to you. And in that private moment, they asked heaven for one thing. Not money. Not success. Not another relationship. They begged for a way to reach you. They wanted some kind of sign, some impossible opening, some unexpected moment that could tell you what they have been unable to say themselves. And the news they desperately wanted heaven to send you is this. They have not forgotten you. But that is only the beginning. Because there is something much bigger hidden behind those words. Something has happened inside them that has completely changed the way they see you, the connection, and the future they once thought they could control. For a long time, your soulmate believed time would make everything easier. They thought distance would quiet their emotions. They believed staying busy would distract them. They told themselves that eventually they would wake up and your name would no longer carry the same weight. But the opposite happened. The more they tried to move forward without confronting what they felt, the more certain memories returned. Your voice. Your expressions. The conversations nobody else understood. The way you noticed things about them that other people overlooked. Even moments that seemed completely ordinary at the time have started becoming strangely important in their memory. And one particular memory keeps returning more than the others. It is connected to something you said. You may not even remember saying it. But they do. Because your words revealed something about your heart that they did not fully appreciate until later. Now they understand. And that realization has been keeping them awake longer than they would ever admit. There is another detail. Someone around your soulmate recently noticed the change. Your soulmate didn't announce anything. They didn't sit everyone down and confess their feelings. But someone noticed. Maybe it was the way they suddenly became quiet when relationships were mentioned. Maybe your name appeared somewhere. Maybe they saw something that reminded them of you. Whatever triggered it, their reaction revealed more than their words ever could. Someone asked them a question. A simple question. Are you still thinking about that person? Your soulmate tried to avoid answering. But silence became the answer. And what happened after that conversation changed something. Because for perhaps the first time, somebody told them what they secretly needed to hear. They were told that pride cannot build a future. Fear cannot protect love. And waiting forever can eventually become another form of losing someone. That sentence followed them home. Later, when everything became quiet, they started thinking about you again. But this time was different. Instead of asking themselves why they couldn't forget you, they asked themselves something much more frightening. What if I'm not supposed to? That question opened a door they had kept locked for a long time. And behind that door were emotions they had been trying desperately to control. Regret. Longing. Fear. Hope. And one realization that shook them more than everything else. You may be becoming someone they can no longer casually return to. Your energy has changed. Even if they haven't spoken to you recently, they can sense that something is different. You are not waiting in exactly the same way. You are not emotionally standing where they left you. Something inside you has been growing stronger. And your soulmate feels it. That is why the urgency has increased. Because somewhere inside them is the fear that another person could recognize your value before they finally gather the courage to act. This is where the news becomes surprising. Your soulmate has imagined contacting you more times than you know. They have imagined the first sentence. They have imagined your reaction. They have imagined whether you would answer immediately or leave them waiting. They have even imagined you seeing their name appear and feeling absolutely nothing. That possibility terrifies them. Because they know they cannot assume your heart stayed frozen while they were figuring themselves out. And now they are facing a truth they avoided for too long. Love does not guarantee unlimited access to someone. Feeling deeply does not erase mistakes. Missing someone does not automatically repair what was broken. If they want another chance, something must be different. They must be different. And that realization is exactly what has begun transforming them. There are things your soulmate now understands about themselves that they couldn't see before. They recognize where fear controlled their decisions. They recognize moments when they became distant instead of vulnerable. They recognize the times they expected you to understand feelings they never properly communicated. And there is one mistake they regret more than the others. They allowed you to question your importance. Think about that. You may have wondered whether you mattered. You may have questioned whether the connection was only powerful from your side. You may have replayed conversations trying to understand how someone could feel something meaningful and still behave as though losing it wasn't frightening. Your soulmate now understands exactly how confusing that must have been. And if they could return to one particular moment, they would handle it differently. They would say what they felt. They would stop hiding behind uncertainty. They would stop assuming tomorrow would always be available. Because tomorrow became weeks. Weeks became months. And suddenly the distance became something neither of you originally intended. This is why they begged heaven to send you news. They don't know whether they still have permission to enter your life. But they desperately want you to know that their silence was never the whole truth. Behind that silence was a battle. Part of them wanted to reach you. Another part was terrified of rejection. Part of them believed you belonged together. Another part wondered whether too much damage had already happened. And every time courage started winning, fear whispered another possibility. What if they don't want you anymore? That question stopped them repeatedly. But something recently shifted. The fear of contacting you is beginning to become smaller than the fear of never contacting you at all. And when that happens, silence becomes difficult to maintain. Your soulmate has started understanding that there may never be a perfect moment. There may never be a magical day when every uncertainty disappears. Sometimes the only way to discover what is possible is to step forward while still afraid. And they are closer to that step than they have been before. But there is another revelation you need to hear. They have been comparing. Not necessarily comparing appearances or lifestyles. They have been comparing connections. The conversations they have with other people don't reach the same places. The laughter feels different. The emotional understanding feels different. People may be attractive. People may be interesting. People may even treat them well. but something is missing. And eventually they realized what that missing thing was. Recognition. With you, there was a strange feeling of being recognized. Not simply noticed. Recognized. As if you could sometimes see behind the version of themselves they showed everyone else. That frightened them once. Now they miss it. Because being deeply seen is rare. And after experiencing it, surface-level connections can feel surprisingly empty. Your soulmate has discovered this the difficult way. They thought replacing the connection might be easier than repairing it. But certain bonds cannot be duplicated simply by meeting somebody new. And now the very connection they once questioned has become the standard against which everything else is unconsciously measured. This doesn't mean you should stop your life and wait. In fact, that is one of the most important parts of this message. Your soulmate's awakening is their responsibility. Your future cannot depend entirely on whether another person finds courage. And strangely, this is something they are beginning to understand too. They know that if they return, they cannot return asking you to carry everything again. They cannot return with vague promises. They cannot return expecting immediate forgiveness. They cannot return simply because loneliness finally made them appreciate your presence. They know they must bring clarity. And somewhere inside them, they are preparing for a conversation where excuses will no longer be enough. There is something they want to admit. Something they have probably never expressed properly. They were more affected by you than they showed. Much more. There were moments when they acted normal after conversations that completely shook them emotionally. There were times they reread your words. Times they wanted to respond immediately but deliberately waited because they didn't want to appear too invested. Times they wondered whether you could somehow tell what they were feeling. And there were moments when jealousy appeared even though they had no right to feel jealous. They imagined someone else making you laugh. Someone else becoming the person you call first. Someone else learning the little details they once knew. And suddenly they understood something brutal. They weren't only afraid of losing the relationship. They were afraid of becoming a stranger to you. That possibility hurt differently. Because there was once a time when they knew what was happening inside your world. They knew your moods. Your worries. Your excitement. Your dreams. Perhaps they knew things about you that almost nobody else knew. And now they wonder whether somebody else occupies that emotional space. This is one reason your soulmate's heart has been restless. But the strongest revelation is still coming. Because their prayer wasn't simply, bring this person back. Their deeper request was different. They asked for another opportunity to become the person they should have been when the connection first appeared. That distinction matters. They know returning without changing would only recreate the same ending. So something inside them has been forcing them to look at themselves differently. They are beginning to recognize patterns. Avoidance. Pride. Emotional walls. The need to control outcomes. The habit of hiding feelings until circumstances become irreversible. And they are tired of repeating those patterns. Your connection became a mirror. And for a long time they blamed the mirror because they didn't like what it showed. Now they are finally looking. This is why certain things in their life may suddenly begin changing. Their routines, their priorities, the people they listen to, the way they communicate, the way they think about commitment. These changes might not be visible to you yet. But internally, something is being reorganized. And there is one specific thought driving it. If I ever stand in front of this person again, I don't want to be the same person who lost them. That sentence carries enormous weight. Because your soulmate doesn't simply want another conversation. They want another possibility. They want the opportunity to show you something instead of merely telling you. But here comes the twist. They don't know whether you will accept it. And heaven cannot make that decision for you. No sign should override your judgment. No feeling should force you to reopen a door that harmed you. If someone returns, their actions must match their words. And somewhere deep down, your soulmate knows this. They know they may have to earn trust slowly. They know one emotional conversation won't erase history. They know you might ask difficult questions. And they have started imagining those questions. Why now? Why did you wait? What changed? How do I know you won't disappear again? Those questions frighten them because they require honesty. But they are beginning to understand that honesty is the price of another chance. There is another piece of news they wanted you to receive. You were never as easy to forget as they pretended. There were days when they seemed completely fine. They laughed. They worked. They talked to people. They continued their normal life. But moving through life and moving on are not always the same thing. Sometimes a person can function perfectly while carrying an unfinished conversation inside their heart. And your soulmate has been carrying one. There are words they still want to say. Perhaps an apology. Perhaps a confession. Perhaps an explanation. Perhaps all three. And the longer those words remained unspoken, the heavier they became. Recently, something reminded them that time is not guaranteed. Maybe they witnessed somebody else lose an opportunity. Maybe someone around them reunited with a person after years apart. Maybe they heard a story about regret. Maybe nothing dramatic happened at all. Sometimes one ordinary moment is enough to expose an extraordinary truth. Whatever happened, it made them ask, "What am I waiting for?" And they couldn't find a good answer anymore. That is important. Because previously they had excuses. Timing. Circumstances. Fear. Confusion. Other responsibilities. But excuses eventually expire. And theirs are beginning to expire. Your soulmate is approaching a point where remaining silent will require more energy than speaking. When that threshold is crossed, people do surprising things. A message gets written. A call gets made. A conversation gets requested. A truth that was buried suddenly comes out. But remember this carefully. The real news is not that a message may arrive. The real news is what your soulmate finally understands. They understand your absence differently now. At first, they may have experienced it as distance. Then as discomfort. Then as something they assumed they would eventually adapt to. But now your absence has become information. It showed them what your presence contributed. They miss the emotional safety. They miss being understood. They miss the particular way your energy affected them. They miss the person they became around you. And perhaps most surprisingly, they miss the future they once imagined but never properly protected. That future has started appearing in their thoughts again. Not as fantasy. As possibility. They imagine ordinary things. Sitting beside you. Talking without tension. Laughing about everything that once felt impossibly complicated. Sharing plans. Showing up consistently. Being able to look at you without carrying all these unsaid words. And sometimes those simple images hurt more than dramatic memories. Because they reveal how little they actually wanted. They didn't need perfection. They needed courage. And courage came late. But perhaps not too late. That is the question neither you nor your soulmate can answer yet. Because the next chapter depends on choices. Their choice to be honest. Your choice about what you are willing to receive. And both people's willingness to create something healthier than what existed before. There is one more secret behind their prayer. Your soulmate is not only afraid you will reject them. They are afraid you will accept them and then discover they still haven't changed enough. That fear has forced them to confront themselves. Because losing you once hurt. But receiving another chance and destroying it again would hurt even more. So they know they cannot approach you carelessly. And this explains why there may still be hesitation. Hesitation doesn't always mean lack of feeling. Sometimes it means someone understands the seriousness of what they are about to do. Your soulmate knows that once they open this conversation, everything changes. They can no longer pretend. They can no longer hide comfortably behind silence. They will have to reveal what was happening beneath the surface. And one confession may surprise you more than anything else. There was likely a moment when they almost told you everything. A moment when the truth came dangerously close to escaping. Maybe you were talking late at night. Maybe you were saying goodbye. Maybe there was tension between you. Maybe you asked a question they avoided. Your soulmate remembers that moment because they know the entire story could have changed if they had spoken differently. But they didn't. And that unfinished moment became one of their deepest regrets. Now they want another opportunity. Not to recreate the past. To finish what fear interrupted. They want you to know that the connection mattered. That you mattered. That their behavior didn't always represent the depth of their emotions. But they also know feelings alone are not enough. This time, if anything happens, it must be built differently. And this is where your power enters the story. You are no longer the person they remember exactly. You have learned. You have survived uncertainty. You have discovered what you need. You have probably become less willing to accept confusion disguised as love. That growth changes everything. Because if your soulmate returns, they will not meet the old version of you. They will meet someone who understands that genuine connection should eventually produce genuine clarity. And strangely, that may be exactly what your soulmate needs. They don't need someone who will make everything easy. They need someone whose standards require them to become emotionally honest. That is why this connection has been so transformative. It wasn't simply about romance. It exposed both people's deepest fears. Fear of rejection. Fear of abandonment. Fear of vulnerability. Fear of losing control. Fear of being fully seen. And perhaps that is why separation became necessary for a time. Sometimes people cannot understand the value of a connection while standing inside it. Distance changes perspective. Silence magnifies truth. Absence reveals what presence was doing quietly. Your soulmate knows that now. And tonight, tomorrow, or sometime soon, they may again find themselves staring at your name. The difference is that this time their finger may not move away. They may finally understand that courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is deciding that something matters more than fear. And you still matter. More than they expected. More than they planned. Possibly more than they ever admitted even to themselves. But if they contact you, listen carefully. Not only to the words. Listen for accountability. Listen for clarity. Listen for evidence that they understand what went wrong. Watch whether consistency follows emotion. Because the strongest love story is not created by dramatic declarations. It is created by two people becoming safe enough to tell each other the truth. Your soulmate's prayer can open a door. But character determines what happens after the door opens. And perhaps this is the final news they wanted heaven to somehow place in front of you. I finally understand what losing you taught me. Not that you were perfect. Not that the relationship was perfect. But that what existed between you deserved more honesty than they gave it. They understand now that some people enter your life and disappear without changing anything. Others leave fingerprints on your soul.